Hello. Okay, you guys can hear me fine. Blink once if you do, or blink twice if you can't. Aaron says, "Hey." So the idea of today, the idea today is I'm Andres Stevens. I'm a freelancer who's been working with animation for quite some time now. I've been using Blender and Bforartists for years now. I used Blender for 3 years in animation studios and by myself, and then I started using Bforartists for the past 5 years. So lately, I've come up with an issue. Rocks, because I've had to do a lot of environment design, and I started testing out some sculpting with a number of different people who work on my team, and it took us 1 week to sculpt one rock, and it didn't even look great. So we thought, we have 30 rocks to create, and some of them are 30 meters big, some of them are smaller, some of them are different. So I needed to come up with a new solution. So I saw some tutorials on Houdini, and I thought, hey, that's cool. Is it open source? No. Is it cheap and free? No. So I thought, okay, let's dig in our toes and try out and do something. So first things first, we're going to go through a 5-step process. We're going to check out and study what are rocks, how to make rocks, how to break it down, and how to understand them so that we know how to recreate them. And then we're going to go and talk about why procedural, basically the fundamentals of proceduralism and why to use it. Then we're going to talk about the tools, what have we got, how are we going to use it. And then we're going to quickly go through the fundamentals. So basically, what type of node trees and things are we going to use to make some rocks? And then I'll do a walkthrough of actually generating the rocks with some problems and some solutions and a bit of the process. And then right at the end, I'll show you the end result rendered in cycles in the viewport, real time, almost. You guys ready? As always, you guys are open to open up your mics, do questions, comment, tell me I suck or I'm boring. It's perfectly welcome. And we'll start at the beginning. Ready? Chirping sounds. Okay, no problem. So, things that I needed to build. With this project, I needed to think about pillars. So basically, I got a whole bunch of references from my client, and I found a whole bunch for myself. I had a look at some like these pillars and rocks and things, which is a very interesting. It's for a game. It's under NDA, so I can't say. But basically, I was having a look at different types of structures. Things that really stuck out with me were these blobby kind of designs, which are really worn down by the wind, rain, but mostly wind and temperature. So like here in the desert, for example, you have these blobby architectures with piled up on these mounds. And then I also had a closer look. They also wanted some cliffs. So I was like, okay, how do I make some cliffs? So I looked at these corridors, canyons, a number of other things. I had a look at a lot of them have like the strata system. This one is eroded a lot by rain, by the sea. I took a big crash course in like what are rocks. You know, they showed me some more references. Were like, okay, we want sandstone. How is sandstone formed? It's a sedimentary rock, which means there's a whole bunch of organic deposits and like deposits from erosion that just layer and cake on top of each other like pancakes, and then they compress. And with that, I had a look at like different ways of erosion. How does erosion work? The world that they're developing does not have rain, so the erosion is very similar to desert erosion. So I was like, okay, cool. So I had the luxury of traveling around the world about 10 years ago. So I actually visited Jordan, and I remember these rocks, and I thought, hey, this kind of like ticks all the boxes. Wind-based erosion, heat-based erosion, blobby-looking rock structures, columns, canyons, a whole bunch of areas. It kind of looks like the world that they want to create. So I thought, hey, cool. Okay. Next step. How do we do this? So I started. Let's think about why procedural. So procedural is if we create a rock here, made by someone kindly here in the audience, if we have a rock out of polygons, we need to sculpt on these rock details, right? Typically you think, okay, first things first, handmade rocks made out of blood, sweat, and tears, and some sculpt brushes, and lots of geometry, and then baking, and then, but how do we scale it? How do we make many things? Like, how do we start from the smallest piece to medium-sized pieces to bigger and bigger and bigger, and like massive pieces of rock without variating or like deviating from the design of the rocks that we have in the particular area of the world? So I started to think about it and had a look at like the things that we're going to look at today. Sverchok. So using Sverchok and Blender's modifier stack, which is kind of like a simplified node tree, we could use these two to work with designing rocks. And so I took a couple of chapters out of the book of Houdini, a whole bunch of conferences. Some amazing artists have already done this before. So with Houdini, they showed me some workflows, some fundamentals. So Houdini is like an industry standard. You guys all know about this. So there's not much to explain, but basically you just take a whole bunch of logical workflows and a flow chart down through a sense of processing information to generate, create, and modify geometry. The good thing about Houdini is it doesn't take long. Sometimes, like by the end of the day, I realized that, yeah, open source is great and free and everything, but performance has some issues. So sometimes applying modifiers takes 15 minutes. So I won't be showing you a lot of examples live because that would crunch this recording too much. So procedural. The reason why I chose procedural is because I wanted to make sure that all my base models have a very similar look and feel, and that the entire world that we're creating has a consistent design in it. That all the rocks are similar, that all the story of the environment has the same origin, has the same type of uniformity to the story. That the rocks, like this rock doesn't come from the Rockies, and then this rock over here comes from the Alps, and then that rock over there comes from a completely different part of the world. No, I wanted a better immersion into the story, so I need consistency. And why procedurals? Because I needed some things to be done in a couple of minutes instead of days to develop. So procedural is good for that, because once you create the system, you can apply the system to anything that's somewhat creative, like the base mesh down here, and then you can use the base meshes as a guide for the style of rock that we want. So procedural is kind of like a really nice middleman that says, hey, I'll do all the work for you. I'll do the sculpting for you. I'll do the shapes and design just as you programmed me to be. And so the rocks turn out to be kind of cool, consistent, and you still have a lot of creativity over it. So I decided to use Sverchok because it's probably one of the coolest open source generating systems for Blender that I know of. I was taking a look at Sorcar at first, but I was using the 2.91 and 2.92 while I was, because I'm using a different version of Blender. So this was proving a little bit buggy. So I decided to go with Sverchok. It still had some things, but it worked okay. And the modifier stack, thanks to some great tutorials online that I can share later. So those are the tools we're going to work with. Basically, you guys, I think Aaron did a nice, good introduction of what Sverchok is. So there's no need to go through that. So we'll just carry on and move forward. Okay, so let's take a look at some fundamentals. What do we need? First things first, we need a layer system. Why? Because we need sedimentary rocks. Okay, so that's the first things we need. Layer system, sedimentary rocks. Then we need erosion. Erosion by temperature and wind. Okay, temperature and wind, maybe some humidity as well. So basically, when you have a rock and you're in the world and the wind blows along against the rock with sand and things like that. Where did it go? Here it is. So if I'm here in the world and let's create a grease pencil. Reference folder. Go into drawing mode. Basically, if I go into this mode here, if I have a rock here, like this is a rock, and we get the wind, and the wind starts blowing. The blowing picks up the sand and starts hitting the edge of the rock. And when the wind bangs a little piece of sand or particles or things onto the rock, it starts to chip away. And it chips away, and it chips away, and it chips away even more and more and more, to the point that you get like these little holes of where the wind blows into the rock, making smooth corners and holes around it. So since this is a sedimentary rock with different layers and things, we would have also on top of that the layers. So let's okay, blur the background completely. So if I have these layers of sedimentary rock, remember the pancake system? So sometimes between the layers you have rock that is softer, right? So you have softer rock here, and then you have harder rock at the top. Because you have different layers of rock, like this layer here might be harder than the one below, the erosion is going to make this red part smaller, while the green one kind of preserves its shape. So the wind deviates around the blobs of rock, creating these pockets around the rock. So that's the concept that I was trying to go for. If I was making a more Scandinavian rock or volcanic rock or another type of rock, or then this principle will change, my study will change. But if I understand the rock properly, then I know how to reproduce it or to fake it. So let's continue with faking it. So the fundamentals is I need a layer system. I need for the sedimentary rocks, and I need an erosion system for temperature and wind. And then I need some creative liberty, because we all love freedom here. So with this, we want artistic control. And from there, with the creative liberty, that means I want artistic control. So these are the three principal things that I needed to think about with my procedural system. So first things first, I wanted some edge erosion. So I started taking a look at different concepts. Basically, what you want is I wanted a system that created edges, worn edges, and then remeshing it into a new shape, which kind of works, but not really. But after some more experiments, I realized this wasn't really the system I was going for. I was starting to have some it kind of works for fractured rocks, more volcanic type shaped rocks, but it wasn't the shape I was looking for. So this will come in handy later, maybe for another project. But now I know how to do this. Basically, it's a very simple system. I also started taking a look at okay, so how can I get these wind-blown pockets? The good thing about Sverchok is I have vector displacement, which means it's displacement instead of just Z. We also have an X, Y, and Z, all three of them. We can add a volume type based displacement onto here. This was just before Blender's volume displacement came out, modifiers, and volume to mesh modifiers. So this would have, I could have saved a lot of time if I had those modifiers. But basically now I have an ability to use vector displacement to create these pockets. So this turned out well. This is one thing I needed from Houdini. I got it. Next thing from that, I started thinking, okay, so how can I make stacks? How can I stack pieces together? And I figured it out. That was good. Nice work. So eventually I could generate stacks. And I thought, well, this isn't amazing, but now what? So using the remesher and a clever amount of displacement maps, I can start generating these rocks on top of geometry that I've dynamically extracted from a creative input. So number one, creative input. So this is like this is where I take the basics is I take a control mesh, which is like a low poly mesh with a nice silhouette that I want. I can use any type of geometry, doesn't really matter. And then from there, I generate the layers for the sedimentary rock with some imperfections. Right, so on top of that, I add imperfections, style, a little bit of automatic style. Yep. So then I get like this cookie sandwich thing. And then from there, I add in the erosion, detail, and more using the modifier stack. This is where like the processing in Blender becomes heavy. So I got the three things that I need. I got a layer system, an erosion system, and creative liberty. Cool. Now let's build it. So I started playing around, started making these cookies. Since it was every frame would generate a new one, and I just started playing around with the modifier stack on a sphere just to see what I could get, or on a simple layer system just to see what kind of detail I could get. And from there, you got the fundamentals. We've got everything we need. Now let's do the walkthrough. Now we can actually go into Blender. Are you guys ready? Obviously we had some headaches, like sometimes a remesher on top of a remesher will not remesh unless you apply the first one. Some issues of displacement. I also tried like sedimentary, erosion for the stacks. Like this system works quite nicely. Tried like caps on top of things for dirt and so forth. So eventually I was getting results that I was looking at. So here you can see down below we have the system being generated with another and then working it through. So end results turns out okay. Now let's take a look at the project. All right, so we don't eat more time. So here's my my good buddy Jeff as a sense of scale. So Jeff here, he's going to show us the first rock. A small rock. Let me just unhide it. This is a pretty heavy scene, so you're gonna have to give me a moment. And here it is. Small rock for scale. That's the first things first. This is going to be rendered in it's going to be rendered in the game engine, but I did do like a simple shader for this. So we're going to start small just to get you a general idea. So basically, wait 1 second, still loading kernels. So this is my rock with the modifier stack. If I take a look at the modifier stack, I have, I'll hide everything. This is my input mesh. It's a little shard of rock. If we take a look at Jeff here, move him closer. Hey Jeff, come here. So, whoops, here. So it's kind of like the size of his, it's big enough to stub his toe. And now we can like, I don't need to generate this, but just using the modifier stack, I can start to think about, okay, let's remesh it. First remesh, looking good. Then I do the first displacement. The first displacement we're using here is the Musgrave texture. With this Musgrave, I'm using F2 minus F1 with a particular size based on the world. And basic settings, you know, almost default. Just so, well, a little bit more default. It has like a clamp on it and a color ramp. The color ramp has a bit of like, it changes how we like have these dark grooves, as you can see on the texture here. So I wanted like flat areas on the texture with a little bit of noisiness with the F2 Voronoi. And then the first Voronoi is kind of like getting this shape. So this gives us more of a rocky shape on top of the on top of the remesh. So after that, I do another one. In this case, this one's a bit too strong and it's not supposed to do that. But basically this is like adding another level of this. For bigger rocks you can see it, with smaller ones you're not. So from there I'm going to displace it again. Now in this case, this looks terrible, right? Mainly because I'm using geometry as if it was a vector displaced volume. So that means what really counts is where are the vertices, not so much the faces and things, because once I remesh it again, it's going to be okay. So now I'm getting this erosion pockets, and in here in my displacement, this particular texture is based on this rock texture that I created, a friend of mine created. So what we did is we sculpted the rock texture and basically cooked the height or the ambient occlusion. In this case we used ambient occlusion to get kind of like this cake design that we wanted. So we did do some sculpting for the detail, and great, okay, cool, but we didn't do it on like a complex rock, we just did it on a flat plane. And that was it. Awesome, super easy to bake. You could use Eevee to do it, you could use cycles, you could use whatever. Yeah, and this was done in ZBrush. I don't have a copy of it, but he did. And there we go. So I got this texture, and this is what I'm using. And the mapping of this is repeated based on the world generally. The world space. I think it's that's the displacement based on normal. Wait, object space on the normals, with the root of it on world space. So I created a null at the center of the world. This is the null here. And I rotated it because I wanted the sedimentary to be rotated to add some kind of like dramatic effect that this world was created by some cataclysmic event in the past that pushed up the mountains and cracked the ground and created spores of hard and soft rock as it was eroded away by the seas pushed over it, creating the canyons from some giant catastrophic collision of an asteroid, you know? Even the Earth has a story. So I rotated the sedimentary texture system based on the texture root. So that it's rotated based on the world space. That means also based on this texture root, it becomes kind of like a world space control, so that I can scale the rock and the displacement will stay fixed. After that, I decimate it, kind of like drop off some pieces, and then I decimate it again with a planar system so that I can like flatten out some pieces, but it's already got some flat pieces since it's a tiny rock. And then from there, then I do a second remesh. Now that I have the new shape created from the first remesh based from Sverchok, or the base mesh, and then I do another remesh. I got a new shape, I smooth it out in the inverse direction, and then I decimate it a bit more and do a weld just to clean things up. And there, I have a tiny little rock. And I got a whole bunch of these, so I can hide this, show you another one. There's I was like, okay, cool, so just make like quick little geometry pieces. If I hide here's the stack. So here's this rock here. If I hide the stack, it's just a tiny little piece like this, which you can generate with Sverchok as well later. But so it's nice and quick, and with it rendered, updating images, updating lights. There we go. Updating samples. There we go. So there we go. So using the material, I can use like edge detection for those sharp bits, add in like a sandstone subtexture a little bit. Doesn't have to be too close with the actual material of the rock that we baked out, based on the displacement using triplanar and triplanar normals. Also based on this null, so it's world space, so that we can scale the rocks and the texture will remain the same. So there we go. First little rocks, tiny little things. Not impressed? Okay, let's move on. So these are my small rocks. So let's take a look at bigger rocks, boulders. Start with small boulders. This small boulder will do the live mesh. So, as you can see, it's a lot bigger. So where's Jeff? Come back here, Jeff. So here's my man with a smile. As we can see, it's a much bigger rock. This is like the perfect rock for practicing rock climbing, falling on a crash pad, and nothing will happen. So as you can see, I'm gotten to a size which I can start to generate the meter by a little bit less than a meter or a meter and a half layers of sedimentary. And so with the sedimentary, I can take a look at, I can start cracking up the piece. So how do we do this? How did I make the shape? Like, kind of interesting. How do I get these stacks? Okay, now we go into the magic world of Sverchok, the land of the grasshopper in Russian. And I probably am butchering the pronunciation. But let's take a look at this clef generator that I have here. And let's start at the beginning. Let's do a quick overview first so that you guys get freaked out. And then we'll take a look at the steps one by one. So here's the tree. Super terrifying. Oh my gosh, I just did nothing. That's okay. Let's move on. So first things first, I need the object. So I get an object selector and I have a cliff base. So let's take a look at my creative cliff base. Boulder small, number 5. Add all the others. Is this my base? No, it's not. Really? It's number 5? Oh, sorry, it's a cliff base. Sorry. Oh, it's not that one. Where is it? Okay, the base is somewhere here. Oh, here they are. I copied it from another one. Basically, let's just hide this. Here's the base right here. So, or that's a bit large one, small one. Okay, I chose the wrong example, but basically it's this rock here. There it is. So here's my base mesh. I think it was a copy of this one where I just creatively wanted something slightly smaller at the bottom, bigger at the top. This was going to be my base. Okay, so I grabbed the object and I guess we can choose this one, yeah? So let's go here into Sverchok and let's test everything live. Unhide it, turn off processing, remove this. I turn off processing so it calculates faster. Select the small boulder base. And now what do? Turn on processing, announce processing, and we, I guess we could like see if anything shows up. What do we see? Nothing. Not yet. Let's hide everything else. So we'll hide the base, hide the large rocks, and we'll hide the generated rocks so that we can see what we're doing. And let's may as well delete this grease pencil because we don't need them. So if we take a look at this, Control-Shift-Click onto the object data, here is our base. That's not the one we wanted though. So we need to refresh and then refresh. So we have it refreshed and this is our base rock. Cool, wonderful, great. Have we completed the mission? No, we're just starting. All right, so next one. What I need to do now is that to create layers, I need to define where these layers are. So I calculate the bounding box of this rock to get the height. So I get the vertices, I stick it in, choose the height of Z, and then use the size of Z as my size for a line. All right. So with this line, I'm going to just hide the faces here and the vertices. So here I have this line in the center of the world. Here they are. So this line here, cool. I love this visualizer. So with this line system, I can like say, okay, so it's based on the height of the bounding box. And now I can define how many cuts I want. Right now I have 27, that's way too many, so let's drop it down to like 6. So now I have 6 cuts. Great. Now what? So what I like to do is I keep my like parametrical attributes separate. So from there, I got my line, and it's spitting out this information, but where do we go? So from this object, I need to drive it into something called cross section. When I get into my cross section, let me just Control F click it and change the color. I guess we can like have multiple nodes. Sorry, sometimes my mouse becomes unresponsive when I'm streaming. There we go. Right. So I'm going to do multiple steps so you can see all the steps accumulated on top of each other. Sound good? Edges, polygons. There you go. And then from here, with this dude here, we're going to change the color onto like a red color. There we go. And make the edges thicker. So here is our cuts. Holy crap, what's happening here? So I just created, using this cross-section node, you can feed in the vertices and edge polygon data of the mesh, the guide mesh, and then you can use the matrix of this, the matrix of the line. So I use the matrix of the line as the cut matrix. As you can see, I have 6 vertices of the line defining the layers. And then I'm using another matrix with some variation on where? Nowhere. I'm doing no variation, okay? So this is like just in case I want more control, but this is not necessary. So I hide, yeah, the stream is slowing me down, but that's okay. So I do the cross section and now I have these pieces. Cool, great, but it looks very uniform, these cuts. Like if we go into the side view, oh, I got some randomization. Cool, how did I do that? I mean, they're not like parallel. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, cool style. So what I did is I got a random number generator. I drive the same size of the random number as the number of cuts. I use a rotation randomization of like 10. And I rotate, like for example, if I want some control, I can like rotate these cuts a bit. So for example, if I want to rotate them 25 degrees, I can. Cool. If I want more randomization, guess what? I can. All right, so from there, I use the frame number as the seed. So like I can like change the frame and it will change the seed. I think, there we go. I don't want it too random though, so I'll drop it down back to 10 and I'll change the angle to something like 15, which was the one that I was using the most. And then from there we move it. Yeah, sorry about for being too happy, Steph. I'll get more serious. So from there we go over there, and then we've got the randomization of the cuts, and now we can, what do we do from there? So after we got the cuts done, I do a merge by distance just to clean things up. And then from there, I fill the holes. So filling the holes is a concept of like, you know, just making polygons out of, hey, why is everything moved out? Let's just change this to another color. Polygons. Okay, so what did I do? Well, basically I used another random number generator to change the matrix of these rocks a little bit. I could drive the parameter into this a little bit, but basically if I turn it off onto 0, they line up, everything's okay. And now I have these faces, solid faces with polygons and things ready to turn into whatever I need. So next step, I fill the holes, I move into the faces, I randomize the location just a little bit with a high and a low, so that I can like add a bit more like chopped up shelfiness a little bit. And then I go into a group node. So this group node here is kind of interesting because it's called a monad. Here we have basically a concept of I grab the information of the vertices with some highs and lows and then a loop index, so that every single time that I randomize the number, I transform the mesh by a certain value, even more randomization, and then I solidify it. So when I zoom out, let's go into here and take a look. I create this bunch of cakes, bunch of rocks. And using the parameters here, I can say, okay, so I have a maximum thickness or minimum thickness, just for the layers. For example, if I looks like I don't have enough layers, I change the transformation randomization of the layers, and I can change the offset of the extremes, like move them back to where they were, or vice versa, or move them out, or up and down. And it just changes the randomization a bit. So now I have some I have the layer controls. I'm going to add a couple more pieces just to make it interesting. There we go. So now that's good, looking fine. That one's not looking so good. I can generate a new version if I want by just changing the frame. Just refreshing. Wait, did it refresh? There we go. Slight variation. This variation is not good because they have an empty space here, so move another one. And this is where you start to see performance hits. Maybe drop it down here, maybe increase the maximum thickness. There we go. All right, good enough. I have a rock, but it's not quite there. So from there, I use the subdivide, and using the subdivide, I have a whole bunch of factors, like smoothing the subdivision, adding in cuts to them, and making them fractal, and the seed. So this is the fun part because I can also triangulate the mesh as well. So from here, I'm triangulating the mesh just before I do this. So if I into subdivision, so as you can see, it's working out okay, triangularized, and then I'm subdividing it with the shapes, and this gives me even more parameters. So for example, add more subdivisions or less. Changing the smoothness, like more windiness, more globularness, or less globularness. Okay, so I have that control. And then more fractalness, more noisy, more style, or less noisy, more smooth. Okay, so that's looking alright. Good base for my modifier stack. And then I bake it. Turns into a mesh. So basically it's live, it's called this. Where am I generating this into? Into gamma. Unhide gamma. There's a whole bunch of rocks in there, so just give me a moment. There we go. Cool, but that's not what I want. It's the ORCH one, so just hide these. And here's the rock. One single piece of mesh. Save if I haven't. No need for now, it's auto-saving every minute. Now what? So this already has the stack applied to the mesh, so the modifier stack can be live. So let's go through the modifier stack, but just in case, I have a mesh here in this thing called modifier stack mesh, where I saved the stack separately, so I can just copy from here. So as you can see, I have the stack all provided, all the shapes that I needed, the globularness, note of the flat planar decimation as well, etc. Everything's ready to go. Whoops. So this rock here, I can just click this one first and the other, Control C, copy modifiers, and where is your modifier stack? Or Control L. No, whoops, that was the wrong button. Let's just refresh. This guy here, onto here, Control, copy modifiers. What? Where's your stack? Doesn't, oh, maybe I applied it by accident? Yeah, I applied it by accident. What the hell? Yeah, you guys, I should have listened to the voice chat and they were saying like, just save your file before you do anything. Yeah, you're right. I can copy the modifier stack of another rock though. How did I apply the modifier stack? There you go. And I can just click and drag onto the other rock. Which is where? This guy here. Where is he? There he is. Click and drag. Onto him. Or onto this guy. Sorry about the little screw up. I was not expecting my little modifier stack dude to not have his modifiers.
Is that click and drag thing? I think it might be in the new versions of Blender. I don't know.
Yeah, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
2.91 build from last week. So let me just test it out again. So here's the size, modifier stack, and you can reorder them inside the outliner now as well, actually. But it doesn't want to work. Or it does? Oh, it is. It's just calculating. Nope, didn't want to do it. Okay, now it is. There we go. Finally, managed to copy the modifier stack. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but now I have the modifier stack and everything's there. So it did the remesh and has done all the layers of the angle that I wanted with the globularness, with the sharpness, with the displacement of the rocks. Got some really cool like shapes coming on. And if I throw on hide on the previews of Sverchok, whoops. I think I might make a copy of that. So I'm gonna hide usually when I work with these meshes, I hide the stack because it takes a long time to calculate the bigger the rock. This rock here is only about, how big is it? It's only under 6 meters tall. So I've been working with rocks with like up to 20 meters and things like that. So let me just make a copy, hide the stack, and unhide the modifier stack again. Let it sit and calculate. It's calculating, there it is. Go into render mode. Let's actually go into a bigger screen. Yeah, stop the processing on Sverchok as well. You're right. Go into the tree, go into render mode, hide the overlays, and render away. Wonderful. So there's my rock. So instead of spending days sculpting this, I could just spend a couple of minutes making the base mesh, run it again, freeze it, copy the modifiers, make another base mesh, run it again, and then with a couple of days, or with under a day's work, I have 30 different rocks. There are some issues, obviously. Basically, the biggest issues is processing time, and sometimes you get these bugs. So basically, when you get a bug like this is basically a remesh on top of a remesh. Sometimes Blender gets confused. In this case, you may need to apply the stack one by one and unhide the modifiers below the stack so that it processes it correctly. It won't be live, but at least you'll get rid of these bugs. So here's the rock. Okay, let's take a look at the shader a little bit. So as you can see, I'm using cycles, which turns out some pretty decent results. I mean, not like super close. I mean, well, I guess it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Let's zoom out. There we go. So there's my rock. Super good to go. But let's take a look at the shader tree. It's going to be super messy, so I'll have to be, whoops. Let's just load that up again. This is a known bug when you change to the shader tree inside render mode with 2.91. Blender still hasn't fixed that one. Alright, let's just read the voice chat for a second. Nicotron says, please try PyM node from vector fields, it rocks. Oh, what is PyM? Some guy says, so anything procedures loud in here, or just like Sverchok Grasshopper? I use both, but I've forgotten almost everything about Sverchok. Yeah, I guess so. I mostly use Blender Python API nowadays, but great to see support community for Sverchok. I also code stuff that hooks into Blender from the outside. Nice. Aaron asks if I have modifiers on the tiny little rocks from the beginning. Generally, yeah. You might have to pause the Sverchok tree while computing modifiers too. Yes, I do that every now and then. Nicotron asks, or says, Bforartists is the first he's seen someone using in wildlife. Yeah, I'm a big advocate of Bforartists. Marching cubes. Okay. What else have we got? So, do you guys would like to see some other rocks before we finish up? Yeah, let's walk through the other rocks. Just to get you some idea of the different shapes. But like, after that, UVing these rocks is a process in itself if you want to bake them. But basically, you do what other people in Houdini do, which is like you make a cross section of edges on your rocks, and then you unwrap the pieces from the cross section. And from there, you get pretty good non-stretched pieces. It's like tiled. Don't use the auto unwrapping because it's going to be very messy. So here are some results. Quick viewport renders, stylized rocks, along with like erosion system with rocks based on angle. Instead of using particles, I use Sverchok to scatter instead. That turned out quite nicely, actually. This is one of my favorite ones. This guy is really impressed. At that point, I was like, wow, just generated these rocks over and over and over again really quickly. This one here took a while to generate. These are some medium-sized ones over here, with some smaller ones. And I was quite happy with the results. So I guess we can walk through. And let me just load up the old original. Yeah, hey, there's saying that the dude is admiring his rock. So have I, Aaron asks, have you done some cliff scale stuff? Yes, I have. I mean, cliffs up to 20, 30 meters. Let me just show you. While I load it, this file, at the end of the day, like some of these meshes, like the big rocks, they're generating 1.5 million polygons, which is for Blender pretty hard to process with a modifier stack. So in comparison, Houdini is processing modifier stacks, or I guess operator stacks of 2 to 3 million polygons in a couple of seconds. Just to give you a comparison of what performance you have from Houdini compared to Blender. So let's go take a look at my cliffs and go hide my lows. Bring out my highs. There you go. Alright, so these are my biggest rocks. Low. Bring it out. Let's go into render mode. So as you can see, we got 1.2 million plus another 150,000 tries, and just under a million, 380, and this one is about just under 800,000. So this one's the big one, 1.2 million. Let's render. So this comes to the conclusion that today, basically, get your references right, understand how rocks are formed, understand the benefits of procedural that gives you some liberty, and then from there, understand your tools and get your fundamentals right, basically understanding how to make your rocks, and then work through it. Understand the challenges that you're going to find. One of them is basically just waiting for your computer to crunch the data. Sometimes you have to be patient. Sometimes you're going to have to find out how to work around some issues from the remeshes of Blender, which is still young, and then enjoy the results. So here they are. Let's just copy the material. There we go. These rocks have the stacks applied, so these are pieces that I would use in a modular way to make cliffs. Get some more samples in there. Oh yeah, we're going just calculating. Five samples, 7 samples. It is cycles after all. I think the end results is more than satisfactory to get some creative like shapes that I wouldn't find naturally, like this L-shaped rock, and still be able to use them. So I guess we're open up to questions now. If you guys have any, just let me know, and I will finish the recording. And yeah, wish you guys a really good day, a really good afternoon. Aaron says these are amazing. Thanks for sharing the process. Some guys packing some holes in Grasshopper. Guys, let's take a look at some. Let's go. Oh wait, I didn't actually walk through the materials. So let me go take a look at these pillars. Pillars are my favorite. Let's just look at one at a time. There we go, here's that guy. Where's my favorite pillar? Here he is. Beautiful. Go into render mode. Will the live stream stay on Twitch? I will upload it to my YouTube channel. Why not? Twitch, you can only save videos for a couple of weeks. Hey, there's his thanks. The pleasure's mine. Thanks for the time. I love sharing these things. But before I go, before I sign off, let's take a quick look at the shading tree and hope it doesn't crash. There we go. It didn't crash. Wonderful. It did crash. It's a bug. So let me just load up a lighter scene. I need to update to this week's version. I think they fixed that bug. I'm always living on the raised ridge because I am kind of like the testers for Bforartists. So I work with the team to report bugs and feature requests and things like that. Basically, I help try develop this. Okay, let's go into my UV. A little small. Open that up. Probably these ones. This is a small pillar. There we go. Hide the lows. Move them over. Alright, so these are the smaller pieces. Nice cool shapes. And now we can like check out this shading tree. Hopefully it doesn't crash. If not, let's just switch it down here. Data tree. There we go. Cool. So what I have is I have a triplanar mapping system. Here it is. So triplanar is basically power with a multiplier into noise. Someone gave this to me. I think it was someone from here in the community, actually. I think it was Gabe. Yeah. Gabe did it. It was really good. Thanks for sharing this. I've also been using Iyad's FX nodes pack. Like, he has triplanar as well. Here under mappings. He has a whole bunch of other things as well. So he gave me, well, I bought it and then I've been using his triplanar system, which is really good as well. Triplanar blend and coordinates. Some guy has a question. Is there any functionality to numerical traverse the surface of a mesh using Sverchok, like converting the blender mesh to a half-edge data structure? No idea. And Aaron asks, did you get the UV unwrapping process worked out with the cross-section method? Yes. Let's take a look at the UVs here. Actually, this is the high poly mesh, so I probably shouldn't have done that. But I unwrapped the low poly one using the crosshatch system. Going back to main. And so let's take a look at the low poly. Here it is. Select the low poly. Under UV editing. Here it is. Select all the meshes. Here are all the pieces. As you can see, let's go into edge mode. The red lines are basically the crosshatch that I did. So if I unselect everything or go into this, these red lines, the red lines are the ones that I use to make the crosshatch. Basically, I go into orthographic mode, go into X-ray mode, I select like an edge like this, I choose boundary loop, selects the edges there, and then I just mark the seam. And that will create a new patch. Box mapping and the image texture mode, you can, but then the seams are not blurred over. That's Devonshire asks, why not use the box mapping in the image texture node? Is it the same as triplanar mapping? In essence, yes. But the triplanar doesn't have, that type of box mapping does not use blending. So you want to blend between the edges a little bit to make it not look so sharp. There's a blend slider? Oh, really? Alright, I had no idea. Can you set it to world space? Oh, there is too. Cool. Oh, you can with this here. You would set it. Oh, okay, that's why. Yeah, the more you know. Anyway, the UV mapping tiles turned out like this. If I turn on like stretching overlays, stretching, here we go. There are some of them that have a little bit of stretching, but generally it's okay. Good enough. Thanks for the tip, Devonshire. Okay, so from there, the materials, this rock. So I use triplanar from Gabe to drive some textures. These nodes are not used. I'll just delete those. It goes into a texture of the rock material. Then the curvature of the rock. I multiply them together based on a color ramp. This color ramp is using the pointiness of the mesh. I was using a cross dot product from True Normals and Normals for Eevee, but it's not as high quality. And then I was using, this is not used, I was using a Musgrave texture to drive the bump, which is the tiny sand, and I was adding that vector on top of a normal of the rock. And using the pointiness with a color ramp, I was using that to drive the curvature and the albedo, and using it to drive another multiplier to darken with another color the edges a little bit. From that, just driving into a simple principled material so that I can get some, like, you know, the sharp edges of the rock has a different material to it. This has no light, so let's add in a light. Rotate. And switch to cycles. View. Oops. Denoising viewport. Flip over. And there you go, guys. Thanks for your time. That's basically it. Bye. Oh, I'll stop streaming.